Councilmember Town?
In your communications with the electeds, particularly since the Speaker is Nancy Pelosi's from your area, and the United States Senator from our area is also from San Francisco, what kind of response have they given you as far as the cost and the potential for early conveyance?
They have been very consistent in indicating their desire to be supportive and to try and get the Navy to be reasonable and do a deal. I liken it to I work for the mayor, and if a member of our board of supervisors was saying to me, "I want you to do a deal with somebody that is this," I would go to the mayor and I would say, well, what do you think? And that's what we've been dealing with. Now, the world has changed with a Democratic administration, but we were dealing with folks who were not really answerable to the senators and the Speaker, and frankly, it's fair to say that they weren't interested in doing any favors for the Bay Area, just given the politics. So they're very engaged, they're very supportive. Just the politics that are going on in D.C. right now are kind of crazy, and the Speaker being from San Francisco can be a blessing. It can also be a challenge because she is, of anybody, the most in the scopes of the Republican Party, and anything that she does that looks like an earmark, she's going to get blasted for. So, we have their support. They have consistently pushed on the Navy to sit down and negotiate with us. They've been very receptive to the conversations that we've had, both us and your staff, about the logjam that not just we're facing, but bases around the country. I mean, there's a whole slew of bases that were closed in 2005 who don't even know the joy that they're about to get themselves into. And we're going to be making a very strong case at the federal level that if the federal government if the DOD thinks that their property is worth millions and millions of dollars, they thought it was when they did the appraisal for our property. Well, it now no longer is, and if their goal is to make a bunch of money, then they're going to end up waiting for several years until that land has value again, and that's not the purpose of the BRAC process. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but
I appreciate that clarification. If I may just ask one more question. As the other council members have mentioned, there are clearly very almost identical parallels with what we're experiencing with the redevelopment of Alameda Point, and we have a good master developer that's put together a plan that's very similar in terms of a mixed-use, transit-oriented, residential, commercial jobs creation. The question that I had in my mind is, as you were going through this process early on, and given that the Presidio was in San Francisco and it was created through a special congressional authorization, was there some thinking early on trying to create more of a passive, sort of an open space type, and just not do anything with Treasure Island?
Not really, no. I mean, from the beginning of the reuse planning, which was well before my time in the mid-90s, I'm not aware of any conversations that were intended to get to that. One, I don't think it's financially feasible. Even if you did nothing, you would have to accept the fact that eventually the land would erode and go away, and the benefits that can be created from this, the affordable housing, the jobs, the sustainability, are too great to miss that opportunity for a place that has such constrained land. You're in a similar situation. You can't really expand. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gilmore?
Have you heard any rumblings from the Navy that if for some reason that your plan stalls or you don't get it off the ground, that they would consider auctioning the property, notwithstanding the fact that it's public trust lands? But have you heard those kind of rumblings from them?
I'll answer this question. I think their consistent answer has always been that the Department of Justice believes that the Tidelands Trust does not apply, that it was extinguished when the Navy took the property, and they're prepared to litigate that to the Supreme Court. That said, they have not over the past 2 or 3 years, they've never given us an indication that they believe that that was a productive path to go to public auction. So I don't think that we're facing a situation, particularly with if it was going to happen, it would have happened under the prior administration. I don't think that, at least for the next 3.5 years, I don't foresee that being a path that they would pursue.
Is the entire area that you're dealing with Tidelands Trust land?
All of Treasure Island, the State Lands Commission has asserted that all of Treasure Island, not Yerba Buena Island, the trust would apply. We actually have legislation that authorizes an exchange, which is the only way we can do this. And that exchange basically removes the trust from all the areas where you saw housing and imposes it on Yerba Buena Island, which is useful for trust purposes, but would not normally be under the trust designation.
Okay, we have similar.
Yeah.
That's part of our plan too.
Yeah.
Council Vice Mayor DeHaan?
Yeah. Could you give me a little better feel on the where you're? I see your timetable here, but are you to a specific plan, or where are you at this point in time? This plan is, and how does it commingle with your master plan?
Sure. So, just real quickly, one of the things that we have started doing with projects that are public-private partnerships that ultimately require our Board of Supervisors approval is, rather than waiting until the end of the process, there's one difference here, which is that there was a question about have the elected officials been asking questions about the arguments about the value of the land. And because we have different agencies, we report monthly to our redevelopment board, but we only go to the Board of Supervisors when we need approvals, which is why we just haven't had that conversation with them. But what we've done is we went to the Board of Supervisors and asked for their endorsement of a term sheet. Essentially, it was a term sheet that was a set of documents this big, but it was the financing plan, the infrastructure plan, the transportation, all of those elements, because we wanted to know that there was political buy-in for the plan that we had developed, that it was financially feasible, and that becomes the launching point for doing the environmental reviews. So that was about 2 years ago. They endorsed it. Since then, we've been taking the infrastructure plans and all the other different pieces of the project to the next stage, doing the environmental review, which is the thing that takes the longest in San Francisco, and trying to push the Navy transfer forward. So, as you all know, there's just a massive amount of work to basically put together plans for an entirely new neighborhood, and that work is not just in our local entitlement process, but it's working with the state lands, Caltrans, because they're building this little bridge right next to our property that has some implications. So we are, we're in an exclusive negotiating phase. We have been since the middle of 2003. There are basically two milestones. One is the term sheet being endorsed, and the next is the full project approvals, which for us is, we won't do a specific plan. We'll have a redevelopment plan and a development agreement will be the two main components.